Once again, my name is Beatrice Edu. Thank you for joining us. Ghana turned 57 years as a republic state today. The auspicious event affirmed the country's true independence, having achieved political independence in 1957, but with the British monarch still the ceremonial head of state. The Republic Day celebration is marked every year, and many Ghanaians have had mixed views regarding whether or not we've made real progress after gaining our complete independence on the 1st of July 1960. The Convention People's Party, led by Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was an instrumental political force at the time that led the country to attain its republic state. On the 57th anniversary, the party, in a statement, extends felicitation and congratulatory messages to all and sundry in the fight to win the country freedom from British colonial rule. The party urges a concerted effort towards protecting the state and fight against injustice, corruption and political victimization. I'm joined in the studio now by a political critic and a former director of communications at the CPP, Niyama Akomfra. Thank you very much for joining us on News Desk.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here once again. Good morning to you. A happy Republic Day to fellow citizens.
It's been so long. Where have you been?
Well, I'm a citizen of this country. I'm not a spectator, so I'm getting on with my life, and I'm getting on with being an Nkrumahist and continuing to champion the cause of ordinary people. So yes, the struggle continues.
And we do know that before the elections, you were suspended as the Director of Communications for the CPP. What has happened to that?
I was suspended as General Secretary. It's a long story. I mean, I can go to court, but I'd rather not do any of that. I'd rather just get on with my life. I don't speak for the CPP.
So today, Ghana is 57 years old, as it were, after we had our republic. There's much to be excited about, isn't it?
Indeed. I think certainly every Ghanaian out there should not forget that 1st July 1960 is the day that we actually gained our freedom, our sovereignty. Because as you said earlier, until that point, Queen Elizabeth was still our head of state. Until that point, we couldn't really say that we were free. You know, it's on that day that we had a new constitution, and we declared that we were truly free, and that came with many responsibilities. You know, it came with you know, the need to be in charge of our own welfare, the need to be in charge of the welfare of our people, the need to be manning our own affairs, running things properly, and that came with a promise from the party at the time, from the leadership at the time, from the leaders of the country, that we were setting out to build a first-class society, a first-class nation. Now we have to ask ourselves whether all of those ideals that we set out, whether we've realized it or not.
Others think that we started with so much excitement and force, but over the years, we've rather retarded, and countries that we even gained our independence before them have developed as compared to how far we have come.
Indeed. I mean, and we have to ask ourselves why it is that way. We started off with a government that carried out all the things that it wanted to do, a first-class nation, and then started out with the right policies. Industrialization, mechanized agriculture, all the things that we needed to do, expanding our roads, expanding our education, giving ourselves the better housing. All of those things were happening, water, electricity. We were expanding on that front, you know. But look at where we are today in terms of any sector you look at, our economy. Are we in charge of our economy? Are we in charge of our resources? Are we in charge of managing our affairs? Many people will say, in simple terms, we're not. Our economy, we don't control our resources, which should be a natural, God-given resource. A wealth for all of this nation is now, to a large extent, taken by foreigners, and we are left with the crumbs.
How do you mean taken by foreigners?
Well, do we own our gold? How much of the gold resources really benefits the people of this country? Do we own our newly discovered oil? How much of that really benefits the people of this country? And, you know, today, when you look at the issue of Galamsey, for example, it's become a situation where a marauding horde of foreigners are running a rampage across our country, plundering, pillaging, beating our citizens. And we've allowed that to happen. We've allowed our rivers to be polluted, and we sit idle watching.
But you see, on the issue of
so we have a resource, we have a plan. What has happened that the plan is derailed, the resources are given to somebody else, the people of the country get nothing, our economy is not controlled by us, our education is not advancing, our health service is not advancing, our housing is in deficit, our infrastructure is in deficit. What has happened? You're
talking about giving our resources away to foreigners, but did it just happen? Well, mining and the oil sector, these are really capital intensive areas. Yes. with you need lots of skills, but if you have people who are not, do not have that kind of skill, you don't expect that you leave these things in the hands of...
The Saudis didn't have all the skills to fetch the oil from the ground in their own country. They didn't have the necessary skills, and they still don't. But the wealth is theirs. And they've managed to set up systems to enable them to be able to get their oil from the ground and derive benefit from it for their people. And today, they are a very wealthy country, and they know that they are in control of their resources. Yes, those that have helped them to have a stake, but the stake isn't, the resources haven't been lost by the Saudis. And you can look at many other countries. Many if you look at the Middle East, many other countries in the Middle East, Qatar, the UAE, they have resources. They need foreigners to help them to do the things they need to do. But they haven't given it, they haven't sat back.
Why do you think we have this problem?
Well, I think our leaders since Nkrumah have failed us.
Do you think it's a leadership problem?
Look at the situation of our politics today. There are many who have turned our politics into a fight for V8s, fight for accommodation. The moment you get into government, you're appointed, it's about cars. Where are the cars? Where is mine? Where do I live? Nobody's talking about what we're going to do for this nation. They're not, the big ideas that is going to transform this nation. Yes, we've heard it all before. Some of it is now beginning to look like lip service, and many people supported change. I supported change because I think as a politician, we need to constantly get feedback from the population that they're not happy. So it needs to be change. And when you get change, and change is now beginning to look like continuity in a new bottle, in new colors. We fought corruption. We fought NDC's corruption. We will fight MPP corruption.
You've spoken about the oil sector, you've spoken about Galamsey, you've spoken briefly about education. Where do you think specifically and critically you think the country has fallen short that we really need to pay attention to apart from these areas if we really want to move forward in a way we should?
Well, I think that we know that we need strong institutions. We are capable of getting strong institutions. We're capable of having institutions that work. If our institutions don't work, then nothing else is going to work. So if you have an educational system, you have a curriculum that you want to, what do you need to do? You need the right infrastructure in place. You need the right trained teachers. You need to ensure that whatever the curriculum is, there's enough resources to. But if you sell your resources, you give it on to a marauding horde of people who come and pillage and rampage across your country and take everything, you have nothing left to be able to do what you need to do in your own country.
Speaking of institutions, institutions are manned by people until you change the mindset of the people.
It's leadership.
Until you change the mindset of the people, how are you going to deal with it?
How do you change the mindset?
You're talking about people who are so comfortable going to places late. You're talking about people who would rather, excuse my language, pee behind the wall of somebody than go to a public place and use the washroom there. How do you deal with that?
We understood in the First Republic that building a nation requires many things. It needs to even train your youth. That's the purpose of having a young pioneer movement, for example, having a code. And that code had things like love of country, love of work, respect for society, etc. Various other things which was inculcating in our youth a love of their country, the love of work, Now, people didn't like that. And if you don't like it and you're building a nation, you need to replace it with something else. If you think that your children are spying on you, or you think that children should not be taught these things, then you need to inculcate in your children these values in some other way. But you can't simply leave a new nation to chance. You don't inculcate in your children what they need to have, the respect that they need to, and the discipline they need to have to take forward a society. And then you think 60 years down the line, what has happened? We don't have discipline. We don't have love of country, love of work. We have corruption. And corruption, incidentally, the British High Commissioner recently described it as just theft, and that's all it is. If you take oil at Bost and you sell it cheaper than it should be, it's pure and simple stealing. It isn't. Let's not keep mincing our words about corruption. It's theft. A lot of people in this country who are stealing, and they're covering it up with fancy words. They are thieves. So we need to be able to understand exactly how we build a nation. We need to understand what we need to do from a very young age. If we're not going to have a movement, a youth movement which trains children, then we need to have it in our schools.
In fact, I was coming to that. That I
every
think
morning,
that
yes.
it should be part of the curriculum.
Yes, there should be a code,
from the early stage.
a young people's code in every school. That every young person in every school should understand that these are the values of the nation. And if you call it indoctrination, well, so be it. You need to indoctrinate your citizens to understand that they must love their country. You need to indoctrinate them in one way or another. In whichever way, soft or hard, people need to come to understand that this is the nation we have. These are the things that we need to do if we're going to have success, and we haven't done that. And the leadership failure comes from the point that our leaders have failed to understand that this is the things we need to do. Or maybe they know what to do and are not doing it. So we're in a very difficult situation. And the lip service is just becoming too much.
Others also think that Ghana, quote, is not truly independent because we still depend on donor support. As at the last time I checked, the donor support alone was contributing about 20 to 30% to our budget and everything that we need to do. Do you agree with that assertion?
Well, that's exactly the point, Beatrice, is exactly the point. The point is that we have resources to be able to not rely on donors. And yet, why are we reliant on donors? We have a situation where virtually everything we want to do, we go for a loan. And some of the loans that we go and get are very, very small amounts. You wonder, we need donor support to run our elections. We need to get a small loan to do this. We need to get small loans to do virtually everything. And why is that?
But is it also not because...
When we are not a poor nation.
But is it also not because we are not producing enough? A lot of people go to school. I mean, it's like a vicious cycle. You go to school, you learn about things that do not empower you to be an entrepreneur. And you want to just get out and get a white-collar job instead of starting from the scratch.
And whose fault is that? As I've said, we started off on a situation, gained our independence in 1957, gained our sovereignty properly in 1960. And our government then understood that the welfare of this nation was now in our hands and set about trying to provide that welfare with the right policies. We needed to industrialize this nation so that we can, as you've said, produce something. We don't produce anything. We needed to have factories which will mean that we had an import substitution situation. In simple language, we needed to ensure that we were not importing as much of basic things that we can produce in this country. And we've got 60 years down the line, don't produce anything. We're dependent. We are taking loans for everything. And our wealth is being siphoned away. Where is our wealth?
But should everything depend on the leadership? Should everything depend on it? Why can't
Ghanaians say that? It's the leadership that creates an enabling environment for people to even... If you don't have a proper educational system, then you don't equip people to be able to go out there and do things for the nation.
You're talking about proper education system, and earlier you talked about weakening. Our education system has been weakening over a period of... What have you been looking at? What is your ideal system that you think the country should have in terms of education to make us, develop as fast as we should?
I think that if you look at India, that gained independence 10 years before us, today can send a probe to Mars. Today has nuclear capability. Today has capability to develop many, many drugs that they can sell to us and other countries. They are making many, many things that they can sell to other countries. Now, that is a testimony of a country whose educational system is producing the people to be able to do things to sell. Now, if our educational system is not able to do that, then it's failing. If we're not able, 60 years after independence, to be able to produce the scientists who will be able to develop things, people who will be able to then turn those ideas into products that we can sell to the world, then the educational system is failing us. So it's not doing everything that it's supposed to do. We are not managing our affairs in a way that delivers for us, in a way that we set out to do. When we set out to build a first-class society through industrialization and other things, that says that in the shortest possible time, we were going to be able to manufacture things that we need, basic things that we need: radios, TVs, cars, shoes, you name it. We were on that path of producing the things that we need locally, let alone getting to a point where we are producing things that we can export to other people, manufactured things that we can sell to other people. So we are still not adding value to our resources. But worse, our resources is not even in our hands.
So it's been said that do not be a spectator, but be a citizen. And you talked about the need for change and all of that. We have a government right now that is saying that is concentrating on agriculture. In Europe and then the Western world, you realize that agriculture really contributes a lot to the economy.
It does.
And even to individuals financially. So in terms of the kind of policies we are looking at right now, based on the government that is in place, you're looking at a government that wants to concentrate heavily on agriculture as well as industrialization, talking about one district, one factory. How do you think the Ghanaian citizens can contribute instead of just being spectators, contribute significantly, because government is about you and I?
Indeed. First of all, on the agricultural front, we need to make sure that we're not enslaving our farmers with so-called improved seeds. The sovereignty of our nation is not guaranteed. We certainly don't want the sovereignty of our food to be jeopardized. We want a situation where, and we've all heard about it, and it's not just about genetic modification of seeds. It's about variety seeds which are then sold to farmers, and that enslaves them, which says year in, year out, you have to buy the seeds from somebody who's manufacturing it. The manufacturers almost certainly will not be Ghanaian. And so we enslave our farmers, and the wealth that they create now begins to also be siphoned out. That's the first thing we need to avoid. The second thing is we need to ensure that one district, one factory, those factories are not going to become another wealth siphoning situation where the wealth of this nation is siphoned somewhere else.
And in that case, what do you mean exactly?
If you're going to create, yes, by all means, let's have investors. But let's not have a situation where, every single district, every single factory is foreign owned, and therefore the wealth that factory creates, it's not going to be wealth which, the end product should not be that we're just creating jobs for our people. We must create the wealth. You said earlier on we're not making anything. If we're going to have factories we make anything, they must be things which are going to benefit us. It should not be essentially another market transporting itself here and just siphoning wealth. We have a lot of things that we need to do, and we need men and women of integrity. And there's a Nkrumah saying which links humility to strength and integrity to greatness. And our politicians simply don't seem to understand that it's in humility that you have strength. It's in your integrity that you achieve greatness. And the country needs men and women, humble men and women, with integrity.
And these are men who come from the communities, because there's a saying that, if you want to look at the quality of people in a place, look at their leaders, because the leaders don't come from other countries, they come from within.
You hit it on the head.
So how do the citizens participate fully?
The citizens firstly need the rightly. Well, citizens are doing their best. Certainly, let's not be spectators. We should be citizens. We should do what we need to do. We should all be talking about. I mean, the fight against Galamsey is a great fight. The citizens, everybody's involved. The media. That's the sort of fight we need to succeed against Galamsey. To force leaders, to force some of our leaders who've been compromised in this issue, to force them to have to take action. And we need to do the same on many, many other fronts. Education, health, housing, infrastructure. We need the citizens to drive our politicians. We need to drive them. We should not sit back and allow them to continue to steal, continue to just be talking about V8s and where their next vehicle, where their next housing is coming from when you don't have food to eat. We need to, as citizens, drive our politicians. And we're getting there, because what this government, or indeed any other government coming in this Ghana, should know that nobody now going to get 8 years guaranteed. An automatic, let's give them 8 years. You need to perform. If you don't perform, you don't get that automatic 8 years. You'll be surprised how many people are already disillusioned. And we're only 6 months into a new government. We are only 6 months into change. So everybody needs to be very, very careful. We don't disillusion the population. There's so much hope 6 months ago. That hope is dissipating very fast. And that needs to be.
And why do you think it's dissipating very fast? You're talking about just 6 months.
We're seeing a return of corruption. We're seeing a return of corrupt officials.
Examples?
The stealing is, well, the issue with boss, for example. I mean, companies that are not registered, or certainly newly registered, cannot be legitimately the only people who should be getting contracts in this country. We're not fools. Nobody in this country, from your trot road mate all the way to doctors or whoever, nobody is prepared to put up with the tomfoolery that we've seen in this country. And nobody should think that they can hoodwink the population again. Nobody's fooled by these antics. We need sincerity, as I've said. We need honesty, we need integrity. When we don't get it, the people of the country can see it. They see it, And that's what people voted for. They wanted change. They needed change. I supported change. A lot of the country supported change. They want the politicians to learn that lesson. If you don't perform, you'll be changed. But if you have a new government, and we begin to see tendencies of the past, then that hope begins to. That's what I mean, that the hope begins to dissipate very, very quickly.
So you've spoken about needing people with integrity. What do you think should be our priority areas in terms of policies?
Well, I mean, the government has its program. As for the analysis of what our needs are, it's clear. We've gone on for years. Every political party in its manifesto will talk about adding value to our resources. We'll talk about the need to mechanize our agriculture. We'll talk about the need to bridge our deficit in housing, in infrastructure, etc. So all of those things are there. The need for the nation is clear. How the government is going to do it. And this government says it's going to have one district, one factory. It's going to create jobs. Yes, but it needs to do that without losing the people. The people should not be left behind. It needs to be able to and there's a challenge as to whether they can do it. There's a challenge as to whether they will do that sincerely and whether the country is going to gain by it.
Why do you say there's a challenge?
Well, it hasn't been done.
But it's just 6 months.
Yeah, I'm not saying that 6 months and therefore all should happen within the 6 months. But I'm saying that, there are tendencies creeping into our politics again, which makes people a bit more trusting, less trusting, or whether they're going to see all the promises made come to pass, or whether they're going to see these things done with integrity. I mean, we're not going to see cronyism creeping into this. We're not going to see friends being awarded contracts because they are friends, and that's to the detriment of the nation. Our resources should have been managed to create the wealth for all. It hasn't. We need to get there. If we say we're going to create jobs across the country, that also needs to be done for the benefit of all. It should not be done for the benefit of cronies. And we have a problem where, at the moment, It's the elite versus the rest. It's almost a class struggle.
So for you, you hope to see some kind of measures and some kind of transparency in this whole system of ensuring the promises, you know, are fulfilled.
Exactly. We certainly don't need to see the sort of news that we're hearing now. We don't need it. And when it happens, we don't need it to be defended. We need swift action. If somebody is stealing something, we need swift action that deals with them. That sends the right message to the population that this will not be tolerated. You know, no amount of words will hide it.
Your final words,
the politicians should be clear. Humility will be the strength of our politics and our politicians. Integrity is what will bring greatness to this nation.
Thank you very much. Nneɛma Akomfa is a political critic and a former director of communications for the CPP.